What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore. This is episode 121, and we got a banger. All right, we have the head strength and conditioning coach at the All Blacks. What is your official title? I don't want to mess it up, Coach.
Yeah, brother. Nice to be on the podcast, gentlemen. Head S&C of the All Black Sevens, so it's a hybrid version of rugby. It's an Olympic sport, so it's a slightly different model. We basically play a tournament style, but yeah, come from Canada, Toronto, originally a hockey player my whole life. Got into rugby in the summer, so it's kind of a progression moving over to the Southern Hemisphere to work and study and rugby. So those are my two sports. I love contact sports, and if I didn't make it as a professional athlete, I wanted to be in sports. So that's where I kind of led to be in sports science, S&C, and it's probably the path for a lot of us. That us ex-athletes trying to make it that become involved in S&C sports science. So yeah, it's kind of where the journey carried me to.
Amen to that. How did you end up in New Zealand from Canada? I mean, our listeners have to be wondering that.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a nomad, so I travel around quite a bit. I studied up in Northern Ontario for my undergrad, and then they didn't really have any sports science S&C type postgraduate studies or masters or PhDs in really good programs in Canada at the moment. So I looked all over the world for about 6 months, and then I found a spot in Australia that was an unbelievable S&C sports science program. It's in a place called Perth, Western Australia. It has a Edith Cowan University, if you guys know about it. It's a really good S&C master's program and master's research program. So yeah, I popped over there for my master's and get a really good experience. They have a really good foundation in sports science and applied, so you get based with teams, you work with teams. It's not just all clinical, so it was kind of cool setup
awesome.
Down there. Plus you're on the beach, you can surf, you can hang out, you can barbecue. It's there 80 to 100 degrees all year.
That doesn't sound too bad.
Good lifestyle.
You mentioned liking contact sports. What would you say is kind of the biggest similarity between the two sports? Because like I said, we have coaches in rugby and in hockey. Anybody that does any crossover or works with multiple sports, what's kind of the similarity you found?
Yeah, lots of similarities in terms of athlete preparation, right? So the goal is to have more momentum, produce more force than the person in front of you. So there's a lot of similarities and transfers in terms of training. You're always going to squat. You're always going to do explosive movements. You're always going to do plyos. You're always going to throw. You're always going to use your body weight the best you can to get through or around an athlete. So still an evasion sport like hockey, rugby, NFL. Probably the main differences would be how the energy systems are combined. So rugby's like soccer, 80-minute game. 15's rugby, 80-minute game continuous. So you need a high aerobic base because you're on the field the whole time. Where NFL, you're on and off the field. Ice hockey, you're on for maybe a minute, off for 2 minutes. So it's how you prepare the body for those demands. And then I work in sevens, which is even different than 15s. It's a 15 or 14-minute game. You play 2 7-minute halves, play 3 games a day. And that's day one. And then day two's finals day. You play quarters, semis, and finals on day 2. So it's always a tournament style. In sevens, so it's a different. If you've never been to a sevens tournament, there's a LA Sevens in the U.S. It's an awesome atmosphere. People get dressed up, party, and it's a big festival of rugby. It's really cool, and all these different cultures and nations come together, like Fijians, Samoans, Tongans, Americans, everyone in one place. Canadians, Englishmen, everything. So it's like a different world, the sevens world. So if you think of those two sports, it's a lot higher intensity because the game's shorter. So you have and there's a lot more space on the field because it's 7 versus 7 on the paddock at one time. If you
Is
guys
there
need me to
more
clarify
or less contact in
terminology,
sevens for any of our listeners?
There's less large impacts in sevens. There's still just as much contact, just not as much large impact. Athletes are slightly smaller than 15s players. So I'm working a metric system. They're all between 190 and 230. 240 max in sevens, where 15s they can go from 190 up to 290.
Gee, yeah.
Yeah, so it's the impacts are slightly different in those two sports.
What are any of the
I think.
crossovers, not only with the sport, but like kind of the mindset between the two sports? Is it, training those athletes? Are they similar mindsets in hockey and in rugby, whether it be the sevens or the 15s? Like, what's it like connecting with those athletes?
I guess the biggest thing would be culturally how the sports have been found in terms of I can compare hockey and rugby because has a really deep-rooted culture around like grassroots and foundation. So it's like a family-first kind of culture. It's feels more like a family than a business in a sense. So there's lots of family days. They sing in the morning before meetings. A Fijian guy has a guitar and they play Fijian and Samoan songs. And every morning that everyone's in a meeting together, you sing, start your day, and you're off to the races. So it's a bit different model than NHL, where it's pure professional. That athlete's responsible for themselves, and they come in. He makes sure he gets what he needs from everyone before he trains. Where rugby, you have to come in. It's like a national program. You have to come in, do the gym, do this, do that, and you're kind of set with what condition you do with the team. So it's a slightly different model than hockey. They're both good models. There's a bit more responsibility for yourself as an NHL player, right? You have to take it into your own hands sometimes and make sure you're prepared to play the games. Where in rugby, it's a team unit, national program, and you do all the sessions together, the meetings, the connections, the culture. So it's a really strong. Probably one of the reasons is Pacific Islands. There's all these Pacific nations playing in one team. So you got Tongans, Samoans, Fijians, New Zealanders, New Zealand Europeans, all in one team. So it's a pretty eclectic group in terms of the dynamics, and obviously each different players has different strengths. In terms of Fijians, are usually super quick, powerful athletes. Same with the Samoans, explosive, and then you have the New Zealand European players that are really strong, tall, battlers. That do all the physical work up front. It's a bit of a cliche, but that's in a nutshell. Those are the different types of body types that come from those nations. Obviously, there's exceptions to every rule in that sense.
As you're preparing them for the collisions that you said are not as the same as what maybe anybody over here in the States is thinking of rugby, what are some of the ways that you go about preparing them for that in any of their off-season time?
Well, that's a very open-ended question, but yeah, it's a good question. We're basically got a 12-week preseason now. Obviously, we try to build the bid rocks first, right? We build a foundation, right, to prepare them for the impact. So, got to build a strong base, right? You build a foundation before you put on the frame, brother. So, making sure we build the strength in the squat pattern, the split squat pattern, the push pull, so they're robust and resilient enough for the impacts with the boys at the top level. So that's where we start it, and then we look at how we transfer that force. So how the athletes, once they can produce and absorb force, right, to take an impact and make an impact. So those are two biggest things. How much force can we produce when we go into it, and how do we absorb that force? How strong are we to take that force on and carry forward? So those are two things I try to build up in my athletes in terms of force production and force absorption, and then being able to produce it in the right plane, right direction, So we train everything vertically, which builds the muscles, the tissue, the strength, and then we want to be able to transfer it and say the horizontal direction, rotational, so how we get the transfer to sport. So still need to build up the musculature with those main lifts, and then we look at how we do it with, say, we have sleds and scrum machines and impact and contact mats that the boys actually run into and smash into to produce force, to actually express it. And then you take that to the field. They have actual contact training. We start with bags where the boys are hitting bags, and then they move to tackling themselves, tackling bodies. So that's kind of moving from controlled gym environment to the chaotic field environment in terms of how we prep the athletes. So this first block, we have a 4-week block where there's no contact in this first block. It's just getting the bodies, reconditioning the bodies to prepare them for that contact and impact. Because we threw the whole kitchen sink at them week 2, what's going to happen to our athlete? Take a guess. Yeah, so we've had a pretty good off season. The boys have had 6-8 weeks off. We won the World Series this year, so we just let the boys' bodies fully recover and rest, for another huge season, because it's a long year. We had 11 tournaments last year. We got the Olympics next year, so we just want to get the boys as recovered as possible so we can start to push them. So we got a long build up in the Olympics, which is next July, so we want to make sure we take the time now and not have broken athletes come the Olympics, because that's the most important thing. Is the athlete healthy? Is he able to play or available to play? So we had a lot of injuries last year, because contact sport, you get a lot of injuries. So we went through probably with 14 guys that ended up playing. We probably went through 22 players last year to field a team. So we had a lot of injuries, bled in a lot of young boys, which was great, a lot of newcomers. So we had a lot of 18, 19 years playing for us on the world stage, which was great experience for those kids. It'll make them better this year. So yeah, it was a trying year. We had to be very adaptable.
That actually leads into one of my questions, was how do you then work with the coaches on the technical, tactical side? Because you talked about being in the weight room, everything vertical, translating horizontally. How do you work with the coaches in that aspect? And then how would you recommend our listeners build their relationships and work with their coaches?
So we have a really good skills coach and D coach that come into the gym. They're in the gym with us. So the skills coach is in the gym when we're doing all the lifts. He's not coaching lifts, but there's mats and a track right beside it where he can do all the rugby specific stuff within the gym session. So we'll complex stuff and superset stuff within a session where the coach coaches technique. So we might do a squat pattern, and then it transitions as your superset into a tackle where the coach is coaching it. Or we might have a explosive or a heavy bench, which leads into explosive pass with a med ball or rugby ball that the coach is coaching the actual pattern. The skills coach is coaching the technique within the gym session. So we build in like a gym skill complex, which is different, a different way of thinking, right? Basically the goal is to get more reps and touches for the athlete in their sport, not in the gym. So we're preparing them to play the sport. So how do we do that? They get 50 more touches in the gym every third day. That 150 a week added up, that skill is going to build exponentially, right? So it's how we get more touches up for that athlete. If it's contact, if it's passing, if it's kicking, what that person needs to build or work on. So that's one of the ways we do it. I do all the loading models for the team, right? The running, contact, rugby load. So we work right beside each other, me and the coaches, on, all right, what's this small-sided game look like? How big is this area? What are the rules? Is it contact? Is it scrag? Is it touch? How many players on the field? Is it 3v3, 5v5? And I have all the metrics to basically state how dense it's going to be. So how much density that session is going to have, how intense it's going to be, based on how big the field is and how many players are on the field at once. So it's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, brother.
No, that's awesome. How do you... No, keep going. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing for any S&C coming into this world right now is what's actually important, right? There's so many different training techniques and programs and different ways to train the athlete. So much technology available to measure the athlete, so you can get lost in it if you're not clear. And you can only be clear if you have a foundation first. So you, as a coach, need to have that basic foundation. The foundation doesn't change. Anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, they don't change. So you need to understand those first before you start applying all the advanced methods of training to your athletes. So, you just got to keep it simple at first, right? Don't venture too far out, and make sure you get those big rocks right, and don't chase those shiny toys. Because there's no magic pill, brother.
There's not. And I agree. Yeah, no, I agree about the whole notion of, I almost think that there's probably too much technology in sport. So, talk about what you think about, use of technology in sport, if you think there's too much, too little. But then I also am interested to hear how you progress your small-sided games, again, with all due respect of, secrecy and whatnot. I'm not asking for specifics, but just kind of general heuristics of okay, I like to see these 3v3s or 3v4s, just big macro level, how you see it. Quick break from the show to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us out, and it helps you be notified when we have new content get released. So again, please hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy this content. And with that, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, okay, I'll probably touch on the games first and then go to the technology after, because technology ends up being a bit sciencey. Yeah, in terms of small-sided games, we kind of work from in our rugby environments, that control to chaos continuum, where training works from a closed to an open concept. But in terms of small-sided games, we'll have, say, speed days and acceleration days is a perfect example for our small-sided games. Acceleration days, we don't want the field to get too large, so they don't actually open up and go above 80% of max speed. We want to keep it close, confined. There's a lot of change in direction. There's a lot of contact and bumping into each other, but they're not actually letting go and hitting that max speed because we're saving that exposure for another session. So we're getting that high density, high work rate, but not the high intensity speed exposure. So an example there would be keeping the field, say, quarter football field or rugby field, in terms of space, but it still ends up being 5v5 or 7v7 to keep it lots of touches. So what happens here? If you go from 7v7 to 3v3, becomes more space and more time for that thing to make a decision, and more space for them to run. So you're going to clock up more meters the less people are on the field in that space. On the other hand, if you move to 7 players, there's less time for them to react, so they have to be sharper with their skill set to execute a decision or play. So that's kind of how we look at our environment. The coaches will design a lot of these drills based on their attack and defensive strategies. I'll just give them the parameters, but the coaches build what they're going to do within that game. I'll just give them the parameters of field dimension and player number. We have something called ball and play. How much the ball is live. I'm not going to give away too much, but how much the ball is live.
Yep.
Right, so the ball might be, for a given game, let's say the ball is live for 7 minutes out of 14. It's actually live for that period of time. That's the work in that game. So I have to build in the work to rest there. So average is 1-to-1 work to rest within a game of rugby at the moment, in terms of ball in and ball out. So we work around those parameters. We call it best case scenario. Some teams call it worst case scenario. Best case scenario is the longest phase of play you've ever had to deal with or adapt to. So say the ball is in play for 3 minutes straight. Think of a ball being in play for 3 minutes in a football game. People will be in bits. So it's how the boys can go to that dark place and take the other teams there, because we want to be able to take them to a place where they can't compete anymore. So the goal is to get our fitness and conditioning up so high that the worst case scenario becomes the best case scenario. So that's kind of the mindset we're working with our players. So if I'm talking too fast, you need to explain anything, just slow me down, because
no, you're good. That's actually something that a lot of our men's basketball and women's basketball coaches, they have that carryover, because in men's and women's basketball, there can be times between the first and second time out that if there's no ball, if there's no stoppage, if there's no penalty, no fouls, if the ball doesn't go out of bounds, if it's just basket for basket or missed shots and a rebound, the ball stays in play. So again, as you are, building the demands, because you talked about, the energy system demands being completely different. Like, what are some of the, again, big picture best ways that you like to, build that good, solid foundation for the boys so that way they can do that, right? And again, respect and privacy and whatnot, but like just general big picture heuristics.
Yeah, so I still push an O2 foundation with the boys. I know it's old school, but it's I make sure they have a strong aerobic base. I don't develop it during running, because I don't want it to be running load. I just want it to be a cardiac load, a VO2 load on that athlete. So some of the stuff we do is we do slow, steady state. We do nasal breathing to help their tolerance, CO2 tolerance. It's always at the end of a day. So it's once all the big work's been done, then they hop on a bike for, say, 30 to 60 minutes. And steady state, low intensity helps the muscles recover, as well as give us a base for them, for the players as well. So we do a lot of that in the preseason. We're 12 weeks right now. We do a lot of the base stuff at the end of the day in our preseason. And then come the season, we just try to maintain it. We'll do it at the end of the day 2 or 3 times a week. So it's more the consistency. Yeah, the boys are bored, but it's more the consistency. You're a professional athlete, brother. You're not sitting in a bank or digging ditches. You're a professional athlete. I think you can deal with this half an hour on the bike at 4 p.m.
Amen. Would you guys have them watching any film or technical, tactical work while they're doing that, or are they just on the bike, being with each other?
They can be, but usually they're on their phones or iPads on there. We let the phones come out when they sit on that. They're not in the gym, but we let the phones come out when they're actually just spinning on the bike at the end of the day. So
that makes total sense.
We haven't built that in yet, the tech with that session yet. So it's just kind of a decompress.
Any big KPIs that you do use when you're helping track, whether it be because you've talked about the weight room and squatting, any big picture, like it's max velocity in your fly 10 used to be like the big thing a year ago in strength and conditioning over here in America. Not sure if what are the big ones you differentiate in the weight room and on the field.
Yeah, so obviously wellness is a big part of our environment, so that's one key. And then in the weight room, I'd say we measure jumps every week. We measure Nordics every week. So we have a look if strength's down in the hamstrings. That's a big indicator of injury risk for our guys. If you're a higher risk, if your strength's way down in your hamstrings after a big week or before a big session. We do counter movement jump, basic hands on hips. Look at jump height off of impulse momentum, if the boys understand that. Don't use jump height based off of flight time. Players know to cheat that measure. So if you've done a bit of biomechanics, if you use any valve systems at the moment, or Hawkins dynamics or any of those type of systems, force plates, it's just what metrics are most important as well. So we'll look at neural change, and we'll look at worthwhile change based on that athlete's SED score or standard deviation of that athlete over time. So it's getting a bit sciencey, but it's basically this athlete's norm. He jumps, say, 2 feet every time, or 24 inches is a standard. We look at his variation above or below that standard to see if he's peaking adapting or if he's fatigued in terms of a neural point of view.
How long will you allow there to be any, like, okay, you start to see some deviation one day, slept bad, whatever. How long will you let there be deviation before you guys start to intervene or start to be like, hey, what's going on?
We'll have a conversation on the day of if it's 2 standard deviations below. We'll have a conversation that day. And usually it's something they're sore, they're tired, or they haven't slept because their kids have been up all night.
Stressed out, like, something going on with the girl or family. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, bro, I've had that happen when I was at Iowa. It's like, oh man, I'm stressed out about this exam or whatnot. Like, but at the very least, it's kind of forcing that conversation, right?
Just creates a conversation. We don't pull them out of training right away. It just creates a conversation piece for us to see if there's anything physical that they can't perform the training. So if something physical, we'll pull them out of training, and if it's not, we'll discuss with the coaches if he should be in. But they're usually in training unless it's something that's going to actually put them at risk of injury.
Oh, that's good too. And then we used to do something similar like that when I was at Towson, where I'd assess, give it to the AT. Hey, I see a little bit of a differentiator between right and left side. Is that how you go about doing it too? And is that how you recommend to people?
Yeah,
it's like, hey, we see something.
From a pure output point of view, we just look at the output differences. But if we're doing, we look at asymmetry and where they usually are. If there's a huge gap, that comes down to baseline testing. But if there's a huge difference, a huge asymmetry, if it's over 15%, it flags us regardless if it's their norm or if it's just low on that day. And we got a pretty good testing battery in place where we measure. We call it a resiliency profile in our athletes. Yep. I won't give you all the tests we use, but we basically look at the whole body in terms of how resilient it is and where the asymmetries and deficiencies are, and try to mitigate them.
Are you a big fan personally of whether it be the Nordic, or because you talked about the Nord board, do you like the Nordic more? Do you like the ISO, whether it's the 30, the 60, or the Razor? You just kind of, like you said, using them all and just kind of building a baseline?
I like Razor as a training stimulus. The boys can cheat it on if they got super strong hamstrings and do it on a Nord board, it's going to spike their force usually at the end range if they're super strong versus just doing a straight lower. So for training modalities, all of those. From a testing point of view, make sure it's controlled and standardized, right? So if your Razor's your test, that's your test for the year kind of thing, to track their progress over time. If it's a straight up Nordic where they're just lowering, that would be your test for the year, right? It's just making sure it's standardized, and then you get less variation and it's more meaningful measure in a sense.
For any of our listeners go ahead, keep going. Sorry.
We do ISO pulls and ISO holds with the hamstrings a lot. So one's just a hold, which is the standard where you're not producing force, you're just holding your body. There's a pull where you actually pull isometrically into something. So it's a different stimulus for the muscle. It's actually attempting to move concentrically. So it's a bit greater force output and muscle activity when you look at a hold versus a pull of the hamstring. So we build those into our end of our strength sessions on, say, a Monday. If we have to run fast Tuesday, we're not going to do our Nordics on Monday night. So it's building your program the safest way possible to make them stronger, make them better, but still be able to perform the main thing, rugby, at the end of the day without risking injury. So maybe you have to do your Nordics or your posterior chain stuff after the speed session, which is fine. So you don't want to do it before. You want to make sure you build your training in around to help the athlete be the best on the field.
Yeah, no, amen to that. And when you talked about doing the Nordics and razors in training, do you have it fully hooked up to the either laptop or iPad, or are you just letting them use the apparatus? Because I've seen athletes and coaches do both.
So some players can run it on their own, but usually our head physio will be watching over the boys and make sure because some days we don't have any technology. It's just a day without tech where they actually just need to train and not worry about a number. Just actually work through the movement and technique, where it's important to make sure we do this and not just look at the output. Because then when we just look at output, technique can vary quite a bit from where we want it to be. Yeah. So we'll sometimes just have it gone and just coach the skill properly. And then some days we'll have it where at least once a week we'll have it where we measure the output. And it's usually run by the physio, overseeing the players do it. So Nordic, the players can run on their own. All the other tests we measure. If we have a Tendo or GymAware in the building, we'll use it and test the guys on their velocity output and their jumps and loaded jumps. Force plates will run, but Nordics and force frames the athletes can use as well.
Oh, that's nice.
So groin, abductor, adductor.
As you're getting prepared for the Olympics, this is something that our American coaches, not a majority of them, have done. Just kind of talk about how psychologically demanding that is, because it is the Olympics, right? Like, just can you kind of explain what that's like for them?
Yeah, so we have a really good team of sports psych and mind team on our hands. We got a spiritual leader and a psychological leader for our athletes. So we build into training scenarios that challenge the athlete to deal with pressure and stress. So he makes it as hard as possible on them. So he'll come in and basically within a session he'll give them challenges that are going to challenge their system maybe to adapt and overcome any situation. So I can't give all the details on how we do it in training, but we'll change the training environment that forces the player to adapt, which isn't a normal, because usually players just run on, do their normal rugby session, where he'll throw stuff in to actually challenge their system to be able to adapt to anything that happens on the field or training at any given day.
You know,
an example will be, okay, we're supposed to train at 9 o'clock. Boys are all ready to train. We're all ready to run out. He's like, oh, stop. Training doesn't start till 9:15. Get them cool down, warm up again, and go again. So it's things like that do happen with sevens, because games do get delayed and do start. So it's making sure you're fully prepared that way for a game. But from a mental point of view, we want to treat every tournament the same. So we have 10 tournaments prepared for the Olympics, and your mindset needs to be that it's just another tournament. Yeah, I know it's the Olympics, but we treat every tournament like it's the Olympics, or the vice versa. The Olympics is just another tournament that we're preparing our bodies and minds for to perform. So obviously preparation is key. If you're fully prepared, yeah.
How about travel? Like, how difficult is it getting all of the things in place, and how do you go about working with everybody else in that high performance team? Because at least we have coaches that understand how to best work within the high performance team and whatnot.
Travel, we're quite good with travel. We have really good travel plans. We had a travel heat specialist with us. Me and the physio, which is the athletic trainer, will run the travel plan. So we start to prepare 3 to 5 days out in terms of shifting our sleep patterns to get ready for the next environment, the next place we're going. Or the humidity, we have a heat and humidity chamber. So we'll prepare athletes for the heat, say in Dubai or Hong Kong, before we even leave. So 2 weeks before we even leave, we'll put them in the heat chamber 3 days a week to prep their bodies to be prepared for that stimulus. So these are little things we do to prep them for that environment. Obviously, the best thing to do is go there early, but easier said than done is to go to the environment early.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you guys about our sponsor, TeamBuildr. If you have any online training platform needs, TeamBuildr is the go-to place. TeamBuildr has the ability to integrate with velocity-based training tools. They have the ability to program and have notes and videos for all of your athletes and your clients. This is your number one stop shop. Been using it since 2019 when I was working at Towson. So I've used it, love it. Make sure you check it out. Go ahead, click the link down in the description. And with that, let's get back to the show. That's incredible stuff. What has been the biggest? Oh, keep going.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah. So for the Olympics, we'll go there early, so we'll adapt in the environment. So we'll acclimatize there. We'll do a bit of heat stuff before we leave, but the most adaptation we're going to get is in the environment. So when we're in France, we're there for 3 weeks before the tournament even starts, so we have a lot of time to acclimatize and adapt to the environment. So that's plenty of time. Usually we only have 5 days to adapt to an environment, so how we do that before we leave, before we get on the plane and get off the plane, how we do that better.
We've heard members here have heard about, you know, the travel, and then with rugby sevens a little bit, so they're a little bit familiar. Is there any of your favorite quote unquote ways to get the guys moving during travel days or once you get to the travel hotel, just to get them moving so that way, because we do have some of our members that have their athletes travel by bus a lot, or they're doing that. So just being able to pick the brain of somebody like you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just making sure they move. What we do though, we have a pool mobility session every time we land. So we got 30 minutes in the pool, helps soothe the bodies, let the range of motion, no gravity acting on them. So it's a really good way to get them moving properly. And really get them back engaged is have either the captain or leader or player or yourself lead a game in the pool with them. So some sort of fun to take their mind off them being sore and tired and jet lagged. So it's how you do that, just to flick the switch.
That's a heck of an idea.
We have something called a triangle, a performance triangle. So we want to make sure we hit this the whole week in our training environment. So we have fun and connection. We have edge and growth, so are they getting better? And then we have focused work, where they're actually doing hard work. So if we nail that triangle every week, we've got that holistic approach for that athlete, and they're creating a really good environment. So it's a really simple way of thinking of it and keeping the athletes engaged and everyone working together well. So we call it performance triangle, basically. And making sure you hit this. You check your own environment in the gym. Are you hitting this? Are you having any fun? Are you doing any focused work? Are you creating edge and growth in that athlete? So it's how do you hit these 3 pillars within your week or your day? Yeah, there's some sessions that are just focus. Some sessions on a Friday might be dress up, which has fun. Like you might be wearing 80s clothes or something, whatever the players want to do. So things like that, how you make the environment a positive place to be and not just fucking work.
Man, that's something that I hope our listeners can hear about with the fun, because that's just got to make it so much more enjoyable. And have you found that guys might even focus better right afterwards because they kind of they laugh?
They lift better. They move better. They're faster. They're up. It's like an upper when you don't even need to give them a pill.
That's awesome. And I feel like that's something though that over here in the States people would be fighting though. It's not something that they would actually engage. But you said it's just kind of been embedded in the culture, right?
So the players have to drive it or it won't happen. You need a leadership team of players that want it to happen. Can't be you as the coach. The players need to want to do it. So if you have a team that's strong enough, you pick a couple players that lead that. You're in charge of fun this season. What are you going to do for us every week, every month?
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome.
You give them a little budget if you have one to whatever they need to do, you know?
Speaking of budget, you've been an entrepreneur for a while now, right? What has been some of the biggest lessons that you've learned along the way that you can provide to some of our coaches that are trying to learn that side and learn how to do that themselves?
So you cut out a bit, but basically the gist of it is what advice would I give any entrepreneurs in the industry?
Yeah, our young coaches that are trying to establish and get some footing like that.
So, good question, brother. First thing is start now, brother. Don't wait till tomorrow. So it's like having a kid. There's no right time to jump into it. You're always gonna You're always going to be nervous about, oh, is it going to work? Am I going to make any money? Is my client's going to like me? Just jump in, bro. Like, have a plan, but jump in. Let go. We call it, in the psychological world, they call it just let go. Meaning just don't worry about everyone else's opinion. Just the people you trust. And just build from there. So it mostly comes down to your mindset. And then hopefully the product you're trying to sell is worthwhile, as in you. So you basically start now. What would I give you? 3 things. Start now. Invest in yourself. Ignore opinions you don't care about or that don't matter. Those would be 3 things.
No, and I feel like that's a good piece of advice for our listeners out there because they've been wanting to do it. But I mean, for the longest time, how often is it you're always just so concerned about what other people are going to think about you, right?
Who gives a fuck? I mean, who cares?
Seriously,
Really?
Who cares? No, I agree with you, and like that, just having that, who gives a fuck? But like over here in America, at least, I don't know how it is over there. It's everybody is very, very conscious. I mean, and again, you were in Canada, you weren't here in America before, but everybody's so concerned about blah 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 blah. But it's like it's not like that.
No, so if you don't think you're smart enough, they're thinking the same thing too. So just get out there and try it. And if you want to learn, find a mentor. That's another step. Find someone that you idolize that is already doing it and reach out to them.
Yeah,
That'd
no, amen.
One of the good steps to do. And if that person isn't available, go to the next one. So it doesn't happen overnight, but if you're persistent and consistent, it'll come together for you.
How have you been able to handle the responsibilities of work and trying to be a family man too? Like, because we've had coaches talk about this before, but what's your best piece of advice?
Pick a good wife.
Anybody that's not watching, she's right there with him as he's recording the episode. But he's not wrong. I mean, my wife's not right here next to me, but she listens to the show. But I mean, I know I had a good wife too that understands. I mean, we moved when she was 7 months pregnant, for anybody that's not aware of my story, but yeah. Yeah,
you gotta buy into the environment. Like, everyone's gotta be on board because it's not a 9-to-5 job. Right? So you gotta have a strong family foundation, man. You gotta really and take the time you have to do fun stuff, go on adventures with your family, actually do something. Don't just hit the couch and lie down. Like, when you have a weekend off, go do something with your family, even if you are tired. So it's making the most of your time on a day-to-day basis with your family and at work. So yeah, the biggest thing there is making sure you have planned vacations, planned stuff you're going to do each month with them, so it's actually exciting for everyone. You're not just in the grind. So that's something we've tried to do quite a bit, is just make sure we have an adventure plan for us and the kids.
100%.
But there's no such thing as balance. There's ebbs and flows in my mind.
Which leads to the balance, though, no? Because, like, you got the waves behind you, right? Like, there's some days where there's big crashing waves when you're out there trying to surf, and there's some days where it's like, hey, it's not here. But at the very least, you're still going out and you're surfing, and you're still trying to do those things to progress. Well, like I said, I don't want to take up more of your time because, you know, you and I talked before that you got some friends that you're going to go help out with, because anybody that's listening and there's been any of a time delay, we are filming 17 hours, multiple time zones. Like, so he's in the future right now. But anybody that's listened to us this far, is there anywhere that they can continue to learn from you on social media? We're going to add it to the show notes at the bottom, but anywhere it's specific you want them to follow you.
Yeah, so Instagram and LinkedIn are the 2 main platforms I work off of at the moment. I also have a book out there I can send a link to. It's on Instagram. It's just on how to be an athlete. It's basically all the gold nuggets on how to become. It's a short guide. It's maybe 30 pages on ways you can help you be a better athlete. Applicable to becoming a good coach as well. We just haven't wrote that book yet. But it's basically some gold nuggets from the past on ways you can be better and set up yourself.
Nah, we're going to link that down in the show notes, but man, I appreciate you taking the time in the beginning of your day to share some insights with our listeners. So thank you very much and have a good rest of the day.
It's been a pleasure, brother. And if anyone's down in New Zealand, just reach out. Based in a little beach town called Mount Maunganui. It's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful part of the world. So any of your listeners down this way, let me know. I'll show you around.
Sounds good, brother. Later.
All right.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.